welcome back to another Access Vikings podcast. This is another post-game episode. We just watched the Vikings and the Patriots play what was some really preseason football. It was definitely preseason football. The Vikings lost 20-12 against the Patriots. Obviously, the Patriots were in town for joint practices earlier this week. I think the thing we all wanted to start with was the quarterback play, right? We saw a little bit different side of Sam Howell today than we had in the past preseason game. Same with Brett Rypien, and then we saw a lot of Max Brosmer. Let's start with Howell, though, as the number 2 currently, and his outing. I guess, Ben, how do you sum that up?
Well, he was under a lot of pressure, as a lot of the roster was today. The Patriots ended up playing a fair number of their starters, at least early in the game. So Howell's going against the first-team defense for the Patriots, or at least a good chunk of the first-team defense for part of that, but not a good day for Sam Howell. 1 of 5 for 13 yards, I believe, and an interception that he was trying to throw out of bounds as he's trying to get away from pressure. Doesn't get the ball all the way to the bench, and it gets picked off as he's trying to just save the down. So he had, I think, one that got broken up that probably would have been a long completion, but yeah, not the type of day that Sam Howell would want to close that job up, because Kevin O'Connell says afterwards the competition is still open for that number 2 job. And just looking at it, they don't have a dime of guaranteed money with Sam Howell, and I don't think they have more than a few, $25,000 in any of these 3. So there is really no financial commitment to any of these 3 that would bind anybody to the roster. So when he says it's open, I think it's still open. I mean, you're going to have to make a lot of decisions here pretty quickly, but open could still mean people from other teams as well. I think we have said that's a possibility. I don't know that I would rule that out at this point.
And what we saw from Sam Howell today looked a lot more like what we'd seen from him in training camp up until this point, which is why his first outing against the Texans surprised a lot of people, at least in the media and spectators who had seen him in camp and struggle. And then he gets out here today against, as you mentioned, an important mention that these were against the Patriots starters, whereas the Vikings rested every starter. They rested 31 guys in total for this game. And so Sam Howell's throwing to Lucky Jackson. He's throwing to Ty Felton. I think it was Jackson who was targeted on that arm punt that he tried to throw away that ends up getting picked off. So O'Connell, I thought it was interesting. He kept mentioning his surrounding talent and the surrounding guys and kind of giving him the excuse a little bit of that group, but then also saying, look, at quarterback, you got to make up for that sometimes and kind of rise above your circumstances. What did you guys make, too, of along this topic of in the week, O'Connell mentioned about backup quarterback. He said the most important trait for me is a guy who can know the game plan, go in and execute without any practice snaps. Do they have that guy on the roster?
It's hard to say definitively right now, isn't it?
Doesn't look like it.
And I don't know that the person who's the closest is Sam Howell by any stretch of the name.
O'Connell had mentioned after the game, he said Brett Rypien has the greatest command of our system among those options.
Has the most time in it, certainly.
Yeah, so I guess there's that, but otherwise we haven't seen a whole lot, and Rypien did look okay today.
Yeah, he did. He was more effective than he was last week. Didn't get a lot of time last week, but yeah, I think there's still a lot to decide, and my question with it is the final preseason game against Tennessee going to be enough to kind of act as a tiebreaker? I don't think that's what they're going to go off of. I think it's going to have to be a lot of criteria beyond probably what we've seen in these games. All of this gets factored in. Joint practices, training camp practices with their own group, what they see in meetings, how they feel about commands of the offense overall. I think it's going to have to go beyond what we've seen here because it's just been a mixed bag. I mean, Max Brosmer, again, did a lot of nice things while dealing with a lot of pressure himself. I think he was sacked 4 or 5 times, was hit quite a bit, but throws the pick at the end of the game when he's got a rusher in his face there as well. So it is difficult to sort of make a definitive choice from that basis. And Max Brosmer, even though he maybe has looked as good or better than everybody else, it's hard to imagine a situation where they're going to go into a season with the backup quarterback being another guy that hasn't thrown a pass in an NFL game.
Right. You and I were just talking about this up in the press box. Like, they could choose to sign him or to keep him on the active roster as a third guy, but it's unlikely that he's going to jump into that second spot. Just looking at the playing time, I guess, overall, were you guys intrigued that Howell only ended up with 1 quarter today, considering it feels like there's still so much they need to see out of him?
Well, I asked O'Connell about that after the game, if that was the plan going in or if that was a reaction to anything that happened. He said that was the plan. They wanted to have Howell get a quarter and then have Rippon get a quarter, because O'Connell has talked about this. He has said, as he's put it, fell victim to the clock a couple of times during his playing career, where you're expecting to get a certain amount of time in a game and you don't, because it's a lot of time where the defense is on the field and you just don't get the snaps. So I think some of it was wanting to make sure Brett Rippon got more time than he did last week, and they had planned to give Max Brosmer the entire half. So it worked out that Sam Howell probably ended up with less than we would have thought from a guy that's starting the game. But, also I think if you can extend those drives and make more plays, then you get more opportunities. You're just going to have more eventful time in those quarters where your team's going to have the ball more and you're spending less of that quarter on the sideline watching Drake May operate against the Vikings defense.
Yeah, and it's a great point, too. They needed to see something from Sam today, and it was 3 drives. It was 2 first downs. Yeah. It just didn't give you a whole lot. O'Connell said it wasn't, to your question, wasn't production-based in terms of his decision. Yeah. But Sam didn't give him much reason to leave him in that game or to keep Max Brosmer or Brett on the bench for any longer. Yeah. So what you saw out of him just wasn't that great. And Lucky Jackson had 2 drops in this first half and wasn't great for that wide receiver core either. So it's questions about depth at quarterback, at wide receiver. I guess the only thing that looked good was the defense from time to time, and Will Reichert.
Yes, big day for Will Reichert. What, 4? Yeah, four field goals in the end.
4 field goals, 3 of them with the new rookie punter Holding and Oscar Chapman. He made the one from 54 yards as well. So I think Will is 6 for 6 this preseason on field goals. That has looked good. Special teams, though, was up and down. They still don't know who their kick returner or punt returner is going to be. They may have more of a leading candidate at kick returner with Ty Felton. They felt pretty good about what he's done so far, but
he fumbled the kickoff.
Yeah, he fumbled the opening one. That's a great point. Got hit, fumbled it. And then also at punt returner, we talk about backup QB. Their punt returner also may not be on the roster.
Yeah. There was a lot of mixed bag on special teams today. Miles Price has the 81-yard return late that leads to first and goal from the 8 that ended up in a field goal.
Right.
But he has that. I think had another... I'm trying to think if he had another decent return.
22-yarder.
He had a punt return.
Punt.
Yeah. Yep. I think that was right before halftime, I want to say. But then they give up the couple long returns. I guess the really long return they gave up was right before halftime to the Patriots, where the clock essentially ran out, but they gave up a 60-some-yard return, and then I think another longer one earlier in the game that sprung a Patriots drive for a touchdown, and then a couple of penalties with guys going out of bounds and then coming back in. That led to, I think when Kevin O'Connell was on the broadcast, said there's a lot of things going on right now, guys, that I'm not terribly happy about. Yes. And the special teams penalties at that point were the thing he was referring to primarily.
Was that before the expletive that he
dropped? I think it was after the expletive. The expletive was an illegal formation penalty on Miles Price, who stepped up to the line and basically covered up the tight end when they had Ty Felton come over on a motion.
That was Brosmer's second drive, and kind of that disaster drive where it started with that, and he found Price on that throw, but then it was called back. I think there was 2 sacks in there. There was another false start. It was like 4th and 35 at the end, and then you got into that punt, which is when the rest of that happened. And yes, O'Connell on the broadcast was like, "Stuff's happening that I don't really like, fellas." Like,
it's getting a little salty.
Team way of putting it.
Afterwards, speaking like a former quarterback, he said we were 3rd and 1,000,000 in that situation after that because they just kept working themselves back so far. You could tell O'Connell's frustrated by the surrounding pieces that aren't allowing him to fully evaluate his quarterbacks, as we talk about. But then in terms of wide receiver stuff, we can't talk about it enough, in my opinion, because we have Jefferson, who hasn't practiced since July 24th, Addison with a 3-game suspension. Jalen Naylor now has a left hand injury that Kevin O'Connell said is still being evaluated 2 days later. This happened in Thursday's practice against the Patriots, where he said the left hand got dinged up. He was asked afterward by somebody about a finger injury. O'Connell said, no, it's more of a hand injury, and we need to let the swelling go down before we decide or figure out the extent of it. And then he said, I'm not too overly concerned about a long-term injury. That doesn't sound great.
No, it doesn't. And if it's a hand, not a finger, I mean, not sure. You could be talking about a number of different bones there. I'm trying to think back to my days as a baseball writer about all of the different bones in the hand. The hook of Hammett was always the one. That's more of a baseball injury where the butt end of the bat would break a bone and kind of the bottom of your hand almost to your wrist. But so I suppose could be something like that. I don't think we need to speculate on it a ton, but yeah, the fact that it's still being evaluated and it's not just an X-ray. Hey, is it broken? No. All right, we're good.
Yeah.
that's a little bit of a, file that away in the back of your mind kind of a thing.
And then you got behind them, you got Lucky Jackson, who's been wide receiver for, Ty Felton, and Thayer Thomas. Those three guys were the main receiving core for Sam Howell to start this game. And we didn't see Jayshon Jones, who told me afterward he's dealing with an illness that led him to be in and out of this game. Who else? Tim Jones jumped in. So they just don't have a lot of options right now who are really standing out.
The comeback was built on the Jones receiving, the Jones portion of the receiving room, Tim and Jayshon.
That's right.
But
Tim led the receiving room. I think it was 5 for 68. I think it was 68 yards for sure. I don't remember how many receptions, but
there apparently has been like a bug kind of ripping through the team here. So the sickness thing is not terribly surprising. Harrison Smith, who we did not see at all here today, even though I guess one of his younger daughters was doing the cheerleading thing before the game, but he was not here at all today. Kevin O'Connell has mentioned an illness for him, and I think it's probably, they said, just stay home. So I think that there's been a little bit of a bug going around the locker room, so that may be what some of other players are dealing with as well.
Since it feels like we've already covered most of what happened in this game, honestly, or at least to the degree that anyone wants it.
You didn't even have to watch. We just covered it for you right here.
What does this game tell us about what's going to need to happen this week in the preseason game, next week as well, as they wrap up in Nashville on Friday, to then get to that selection of the 53-man roster and get ready for week 1?
I think you're still looking at a few spots that may need to get addressed outside the building. I mean, if we're talking about the quarterback depth, we're talking about the wide receiver depth, I think there are still a lot of questions at those two spots. And like we're saying, I don't know how much that last preseason game functions as the tiebreaker. Maybe it does. Maybe they say, hey, we're going to kind of give everybody their chance and see where everybody stands out. But like I say, I think you'd probably make that decision on a larger sample size than what you see in a third game where you don't quite know where you're going to get from the Titans. So I think there's still a lot of work to do from the coaches and then probably the front office to figure out some of the depth at a couple of pretty important spots, at least in the skill position room.
Yeah, and special teams, like we talked about, battles up for grabs there. The returner jobs, the gunner jobs on kickoff, kick return, blocking. They've been mixing through a lot of different guys, receivers, defensive backs, who are trying to make this roster. So those
that may have something to say about what the receiver room looks like. It's the special teams piece of it.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, so when you see somebody like Tim Jones, who leads the group in receiving today, but then has one of those dumb penalties where he gets pushed out of bounds and comes back in and gets flagged. They had 4 penalties on special teams today by 4 different people. That's going to ring in terms of the evaluations of when coaches get together and talk about this stuff of who they're going to keep, who they're going to trust on this team. You try to put together a 53. Are there 5 receivers that are healthy that don't count Jordan Addison that you feel good about putting on this team right now? Because I get to Ty Felton is the third.
Yep.
And then you've got I've had Lucky Jackson on there just on my own projection.
Agreed.
And then I had Jayshon Jones before, but then you see him out here today. He's battling a sickness, didn't look 100% healthy out there, but he's the guy that seems to have the most trust on offense behind Lucky, but we just haven't seen much out of him in camp or preseason games.
Yeah, it's not a position where Rondale Moore going down is news they were probably terribly excited to hear. I mean, that's never going to be something that the team wants to see happen with that type of an injury, but that's not a spot where they probably feel great about the depth and not really one where they wanted to lose people.
No, and I guess the only other thing I wanted to touch on with you guys is get your thoughts on what did you think of the decisions to rest so many guys in this game? And this isn't abnormal for O'Connell. We see this every year, but it included first-round rookie Donovan Jackson. It included Dallas Turner. It included Theo Jackson. It included Jeff Okudah.
Yes.
Like, what did you guys think of that?
Well, I mean, I think it is very in line with what we've seen O'Connell do in these weeks, or these games, I should say, that follow joint practices. They look at those games, they look at those joint practices as games in a lot of ways. And he even talked about doing a little bit of game planning for that second day to get ready for what the Patriots were going to throw when he was kind of working with J.J. McCarthy. So they probably, in a lot of ways, say that is the main event for the week. I think they spend a lot of time with the medical staff looking at the cumulative load on players. And I think when they're looking at it, they see how much of a physical taxation there's already been on players throughout the week. And I think a lot of the decisions come from that. But yeah, it is, the upshot of that is it's another opportunity to have game reps, which, still involve a little more speed. They involve full contact. They involve taking people to the ground that look a little bit different than a joint practice. So, yeah, they're in a lot of these spots where there's still a lot of decisions to make. It's the choice I expected them to make, but it does come with that uncertainty of missing a few more game reps.
I think I was a little surprised that particularly Dallas and then Theo Jackson didn't even dress. Like, they were fully in street clothes with a lot of the other guys that we had already seen sit last week, just because those guys are those kind of cusper guys where they do play a lot of first team snaps, but they also we see them in practice with the second team kind of being the lead guys there, and knowing that O'Connell knew that Drake May was going to come in and play 1 or 2 series this game. I think he tapped out at 2.
Yeah.
That surprised me a little bit. Again, like I said with Donovan Jackson on Thursday, I wonder how counterproductive they consider it to have him working with other offensive linemen that aren't the ones that he's going to spend the entire season with. And so I wonder if that went into that part of it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's very possible. I mean, I think we have heard them factor that in when J.J. McCarthy comes out last week in that game saying we don't want him playing with other people. So some of that continuity, I think that's a good point, that there's probably some of that factors in there.
Donovan still had a cheering squad here today, though, didn't he?
Yes, both his parents were still here, very excited. If you saw that video circulating Vikings Twitter of Mama Jackson crying, she said that she was a little shocked at first to find that video of herself online, but then that she was happy to have the moment captured in perpetuity of seeing her son run out there on the field for the first time last week. So that was cool, getting to meet her, talk to her a little bit, hear about Donovan, and we'll have more to come on that. But
you were saying the Jackson family comes to every game, right?
yes, they do come to every game.
Yeah,
so no
even though he
surprise
wasn't
that
playing today, they were still here.
I mean, I think if they were here for this one, they come to every game, because this would have probably been the one that they're like, you know what, no, we don't need to do it. But if you're going to be here for this, knowing that your son's not going to play, they're probably going to be there for all of them.
Yeah, that's true.
And good transition back to what my final question was going to be. Do we think they bring back any of the starters for next week's game at all? Just based on how this one went, are they going to play Howell more? Do they bring back some of those guys? Just want to get him a little bit more action? What do we think there?
I would think a 0.0% chance anybody who matters plays in that last game, based on how they handle this and based on how we've seen them handle every preseason game under Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, we have not seen them err on the side of more reps for starters in these things in general. It's been, I think we've seen some years where they've done kind of almost this scrimmage type thing. Yeah. I think there was one year they did that, maybe even in the stadium, where at TCO Stadium, probably the first year that O'Connell was a coach, where it was maybe a little more of let's make sure the coaching staff, everybody that's in these new spots knows what they're doing in terms of getting position groups in and all of those kinds of things. O'Connell is a play caller. But yes, the general approach has been fewer reps for the starters. Yeah, that said, it will be interesting to see whether anybody, whether those corners, Jordan Addison's going to play, I think. So, who do you put out there with him? Because I think they do want to see him one more time before the suspension kicks
you think Addison will play?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think KOC said that with Paul Allen on the pregame show that he does plan to play Addison in that game because they just won't get to use him anymore for 3 weeks after that. So, does that change what you do on offense with the first group? I wouldn't think a lot. I mean, it's maybe more time with Howell.
Yeah.
I don't know that it is anybody else coming with him.
They might need to play him with their wide receiver depth being so
Keep
shot
everybody else healthy
right now. But that's a good point. If Addison gets hurt in that game, hey, you got 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So,
well, I don't know that there's much more we can say about this one.
Not really. No, not a whole lot. We already praised Will Reichard, Will the Thrill.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be here for you guys, Vikings fans. Sleep easy, because Will the Thrill is here.
We will, though, have more coverage on the StarTribune.com and in the week ahead as the Vikings get ready for that final preseason game in Nashville against the Titans. So stay tuned there. Stay tuned on our Instagram at Strip Sports, and then on the Star Tribune YouTube channel, where we should have another Access Vikings episode for you all later this week. But until then, that's all we have for now from US Bank Stadium.
I'm excited to not be watching any more preseason football in person. How about you, Andrew?
I'm sorry, Emily.
Yeah.
I'll be there for you guys. Don't worry.
Rookie's got to pay her dues.